Hello and welcome to Reaching for the Moon, presented by Everglades Moon Local Council, Florida chapter of Covenant of the Goddess. COG supports individual works by its covens, members, and local councils. It's a vibrant network of a myriad of Wiccan and witchy resources, religious support, friendships, service opportunities, and more. To find out more, visit our website, emlc.net, our Facebook page, facebook.com/EvergladesMoon, or Twitter, @EMLCTweets.
Hello everyone, this is Lady Bridget, and welcome to episode 28 for Yule 2016. My apologies for getting this episode out a little later than usual, but I wanted to be able to include at least one of the many outstanding workshops we were lucky enough to experience at this year's Turning the Tides event. For those of you who don't know, Turning the Tides is an annual camping event that Everglades Moon puts on during December in South Florida, where the weather is usually wonderful. This year we had more than our share of rain, but we had a wonderful time anyway. Maybe next year you could plan to join us. The workshop we will be listening to in this episode was given by Rayna on the healing powers of holly and mistletoe. This workshop was held outdoors and has been edited to remove as many outside noises as possible. And it was also edited out the very long silence while we went and communed with the trees. You'll know where that is when you hear it. But first up is FooDoo with Qabal, and this is about making Skyr. Qabal recently traveled to Iceland with friends, and this is one of the fabulous foods he sampled there. And he decided to try making it and is sharing that recipe with us. I've tasted some that he made, and I can tell you I am determined to try making some of this myself, because it was that good. I also want to let you know that we love hearing from you. I especially will take your comments and suggestions to heart. For example, I got some requests to tell about the music as it plays, instead of in the opening segment. So that is how I will introduce our music in this episode, and we do have 3 songs for you. It's easy to get in touch with us. You can email us at em@cog.org. That's em@cog.org. I look forward to hearing from you. Enjoy, and happy solstice!
For angels I call, I commanded. For angels I called, open-handed. Open-armed I stood in a circle of my own, offered prayers and incense, and I climbed upon my throne. Unable, a magician fully grown. For angels I called and they appeared. For angels I called and they appeared. For angels I called and they guarded. For angels I called and they warded. I was safe within their arms to sleep and cast about. Would not fear the changes or the world that loomed without, till the granite round my heart had cracked, and still I held no doubt. For angels I called and they drew near. For angels I called and they drew near. Raphael, my wings, Gabriel, my breast, Michael, my desire, and Oriel, my rest. Tikkun, Tikkun HaNefesh, Tikkun HaNefesh. For angels I called, I am your master. For angels I called and I heard laughter. Thundered and burned low and rang within my ears. Shook me to my bones in humility and fear. Collapsed upon the earth and I cried a million tears. For angels I wept, make me whole. For angels I wept, make me whole. Raphael, my wings, Gabriel, my breast, Michael, my desire, and Oriel, my rest. Tikkun, Tikkun HaNefesh, Tikkun HaNefesh. For angels I call, will you align me? For angels I call, will you define me? They left me to my work in the darkest of my days. Never doubted for a moment that they would light my way. Rose upon my feet, destroyed the boundaries I had raised. For angels I cried and we were one. For angels I called and we were one. Raphael, my wings, Gabriel, my breast, Michael, my desire, and Oriel, my rest. Tikkun hanefesh, tikkun hanefesh, tikkun hanefesh, tikkun hanefesh. Raphael, my wings, Gabriel, my breast, Michael, my desire, and Oriel, my rest. Tikkun hanefesh, 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 tikkun hanefesh.
That was the song Four Angels by Mama Gina, and it's from her album The Undertaker's Daughter. You can learn more about Mama Gina and purchase her music at mamagina.com. MAMAGINA.com.
Hi, I'm Qabal, and this is FooDoo. So, happy Yule! A few weeks ago, some witches y'all know and me went to Iceland. And we went to all sorts of cool places like Thingvellir National Park, where the first parliament met 1100 years ago. We dived into the 34-degree water of the Sulphur Fissure that separates the North American and the Eurasian tectonic plates, and that was cool. We also visited the Black Beach at Vik, we went to Reykjavik, and we also got lost and went to all sorts of unpronounceable places. It was an awesome time, and we should all go. And don't worry, this isn't a travel podcast. I'm getting along. We tasted all sorts of things, including a buffet of wild game. Anyway. And we also had the opportunity to buy all sorts of Icelandic delicacy, and I fell in lick-the-bowl love with something called Skyr. So Skyr is a traditional Icelandic milk product that has kind of changed over time, and I was determined to be able to make it here because I didn't think that I would ever be able to find it in the States, and guess what, I'm right. So it's in the yogurt aisle, but it's not really a yogurt. In fact, it's really a cheese. And so it has components that are part of the traditional cheese making process, and it also has components that are yogurt-like in that it is a fermented milk. And it is tasty. And I figured out a recipe, and I thought I should share it. So, Skyr is a cultured dairy product, and its processing follows very much like a yogurt processing, and then it takes a turn. It uses slightly different ingredients at the beginning, and then there's a kind of straining that happens very often with products that are similar, like Greek yogurt. So, as I understand it, Skyr was brought to Iceland from Norway at about the time that the Thingvellir Parliament got together. And so that puts it at about 1100 years ago. And it's made, or originally was made with raw milk, and of course now it's made with pasteurized milk. Now, what I learned was that the bacterial strains that need to go into this are a little bit more diverse than the bacterial strains that go into yogurt. The ones that go into yogurt are usually Streptococcus thermophilus and Lactobacillus bulgaricus. And you can order these online, or you can just purchase a plain yogurt that has no flavorings in it and use that as your starter base. But it turns out that Skyr has a few other bacterial types in it. And when we look at those bacterial types, they don't seem to parallel some of the ones that we would find in most other yogurt-like products. But it doesn't seem that there's a tremendous difference in taste. So what I do suggest is that for the starter pack that we find a Skyr-like product that is available in the US and use that as a base. So let me describe a little bit more about Skyr so that you have a sense of what the final product looks and tastes like, and that gives a sense of how the difference is from yogurt. So yogurt would be a little bit more runny, and even if you went to a Greek yogurt, the Greek yogurt doesn't quite get to the consistency that Skyr does. Skyr is somewhere between a very heavy Greek yogurt and a cream cheese. I would actually argue that Skyr is really a cheese product rather than a yogurt product. Even again, it's found in the yogurt aisle, because one of the ingredients that does go into Skyr is rennet, and that's a very common ingredient in cheese. So as you can imagine, the final product is going to have a slight taste like cream cheese. It's going to not hold together like cream cheese. It's going to be a little bit runnier, but it's going to have the tang of yogurt. So let's get to making it. What we need for this is 2 quarts whole milk. We need to use rennet, and there are 2 types of rennets that are available. The first is vegetable rennet, and the second one is animal rennet in health food stores, and they come in a couple of ounce bottles. You can actually also find tablets of rennet in the aisle, the baking aisle at some supermarkets. You'll find them where the Jell-O is, because these tablets are sometimes used for making custards. I actually don't recommend them because they also are packed in with other ingredients that will not work so well in terms of the consistency of the final product. So if you can find a liquid rennet that's either a vegetable origin or animal origin, it's a superior product for this. So as a reminder, rennet is a substance that will coagulate, and it turns out vegetable rennet, if you are making a vegetarian version, is available from some plants, including fig leaves, melons, safflowers, and wild thistles, and they can be combined in such a way that you can get a rennet product out of them. And also there's microbial rennet that's also available, and these are bacteria or fungi that will produce the rennet enzyme, and you can use these as well. It doesn't matter whether it's a vegetable source or an animal source, rennet is very easy. You also need 1 piece or maybe 2 pieces of specialized equipment. The first piece of specialized equipment that you need is the thermometer, because you do need to raise the milk to a very specific level in order to kill off other bacteria, and then you need to lower the temperature of the milk, and you need to know when the temperature is appropriate to add your starter to the milk. So the first thing is a thermometer, and the second thing that you need is a strainer. Now the best strainer is going to be a coffee strainer, and supermarkets that will sell espresso coffees or Greek coffees will have a strainer that's kind of a cloth strainer, and you pour the coffee through that in order to get your final product, and it turns out that that strainer will work really well. The other thing that will work is that if you cut up an old white t-shirt, that cloth is about the right consistency in order to be able to place in a colander or another strainer, and it will work perfectly fine. The thing that I've learned is that cheesecloth doesn't quite do the job. It's still too open in terms of the spaces, so it doesn't produce the final product. You really do need that kind of tighter weave in order to get a good product at the end. Okay, so as a recap, let's go over what we're going to need. We're going to need half a gallon of milk, or 2 quarts of milk. We're going to need some rennet. We're going to need some starter yogurt that is completely plain. There is a Skyr-like product that's available in some supermarkets that Rayna use in order to extract the necessary bacteria from it. So the final thing that we're going to need is a pot large enough to hold the 2 quarts of milk, and we want it to have a top. So, how to make this? We take the milk, we pour it into the pot, and we heat it to about 185 degrees, and we're going to let it sit at 185 degrees for about 2 minutes. After that time, we're going to pull it off the heat and then put the lid on the top and let it sit until the temperature of the milk comes down to 110 degrees, or between 110 and 115 degrees. That'll take about 45 minutes or so. At that point, we add 2 tablespoons of our starter yogurt, or if you've ordered the bacterial culture in, and then we add 6 drops of rennet. We stir it completely, and then we cover it and then put it in the oven, and we let it sit there for 10 hours. Don't peek. Let it sit for 10 hours. Will happen. Either you'll see a complete separation of the milk and the whey, or the curds and the whey from the milk, or you will see a very thick kind of custard-like product. Either one is fine, because now what we're going to do is we're going to pour that product into the strainer. If we were using the regular coffee strainer, we're going to pour it in there, and if we're using the t-shirt method, we're going to put the t-shirt in a colander and then pour the milk into there. Now what we want to do is put the colander or strainer into a bowl and put both of those things into the refrigerator. We want it to sit there for another few hours while the whey drips out of the cheese. And after a couple of hours, we'll get a very, very thick product that will look like cream cheese. And at that point, it's ready to eat. So, I suggest that you put it in a separate container, seal it up so that it doesn't get any smells or tastes from other parts of the refrigerator, and it'll keep for about 2 weeks. Before you're done eating it, though, you can take a couple of tablespoons of this, put it to the side, and use it as your starter for your next batch of Skyr. And I wanted to say one other thing for the very end so that we can remember it. I highly recommend that every utensil that's used in making this product is cleaned thoroughly with boiling water, and that your stirrers be metal or glass. That way you're not using an organic product that might steek in a different bacteria. And the reason for this is that 10-hour fermentation is a really long time, and it's going to happen in a warm place like the oven or a side of the kitchen that's relatively warm, and we don't want any contaminants in there. So once that your product is done and you've refrigerated, it's good to go. I suggest that it be eaten plain with just a little bit of honey on top of it. It's absolutely delicious, and I hope you enjoy it, and that you have an awesome, awesome Yule.
And coming up, Winter White by Aradia, from her album Songs for All Seasons, which sadly is no longer available. However, if you go back and listen to earlier versions of the podcast, you will find many of her songs on those.
Is Queen of the moon and the stars, we call to thee. Queen of the moon and the stars, we call to thee.
Okay, this is not a new workshop. This is new material, and I feel underprepared. I'll just say a little bit on the plant identification part, because when we started planting tides and we said, oh, let's do it kind of very Yule-y this year. Let's do a Yule theme. I'm like, okay, what can I do related to that and related to plants, which is my big thing magically right now. And then I said, oh, I know I'm seeing mistletoe on that site. It could work with mistletoe. And I'm like, okay, mistletoe. Now I can't find the mistletoe or the holly that I thought was here. But I have an idea that it is going to work for us anyway. So the reason I thought about talking about mistletoe and holly is that obviously they're very Yule associated. And what is the reason that they're very Yule associated?
Well, they're both green through the winter snow.
Exactly. For our Northern European ancestors, these were some of the only green through the winter snow plants, in addition to the pine tree, right, and a few others.
And the other thing is your red berries on the holly are symbolic of the blood the winter king shed that was the promise of spring.
Right. Holly king, yeah. Holly in particular has the red and green combination that's sacred to witches. Mistletoe has white and green, which is also a key color for us. So both of them have that going on, but mostly they have this green through. Even at midwinter, one of the Druidic rituals was to harvest mistletoe at midwinter, because really it was the only green thing out and about in the world. So that is a really basic point that all of us already know about these two plants, but it is a very important point that we can go deeper on in just a moment. I wanted to say a couple of other things about both of these. First of all, one of the things about mistletoe that's also very important, does anybody know about the Druidic ritual of harvesting?
You cut it with a silver sickle on the 7th day after the full moon from solstice.
From winter solstice, right?
And you have to catch it in a like a sheet or something?
Right. You can't let it touch the ground. That was one part of the ritual. So the Druids, and this was recorded into early European history, but it's more of a classical practice where they would harvest it, like Alex just described it well. It's the 7th day after the full moon, after the winter solstice. All of that detail is interesting, but we don't have the Druids to ask about precisely why they chose that, but what we can take from it was they were making sure to align themselves with the energies that were present at that time, right? So if you're observing the solstices and equinoxes and you're also observing the lunar calendar, like most of our ancestors did, so you're going to time that harvest to both of those two things, and to then add in numerology as well, with being the 7th day after the full moon. So what we can take from that is that this harvesting ritual was such a deal that it needed to be highly coordinated, very special, sort of synchronizing your own rhythms with your own rhythms of activities, like harvesting plants, with these greater cosmic rhythms that are known. All right, so another thing about mistletoe that I was going to mention. Mistletoe is a parasitic plant, right? So it grows on the trees. And here in North Florida, it's really pretty easy to find it on oak trees because less of the landscape is green. at this time of year. And it's just this dense clump of green. And the name actually comes, mistletoe is an Anglo-Saxon words for bird twig, because they knew that birds would poop and spread seeds, and those seeds of the mistletoe would lodge on twigs and grow there. So it actually grows on the bark of the tree, the oak tree, and draws its nutrients from the oak tree. So the Druids knew this. They understood that for them that meant that the mistletoe was living off the soul of the oak, and that was one of the reasons why it was also very important for them. Oak being one of their major trees. So if something lived off in a symbiotic relationship with the oak, then they were all about that and learning more about it.
Were you aware that the mistletoe only grows where the soil has limestone in it?
No, I wasn't.
If the soil is acidic, it won't grow there. Even though it's not directly connected to the soil, the oak doesn't have what the mistletoe needs if the soil isn't sweet.
That's fantastic. Fascinating. So much with down here. Yeah. Exactly. That explains, right. That explains it definitely. Also, then in other words, the mistletoe was sacred to them because it just sort of appeared out of nowhere. It wasn't a plant that you could see had root system. It didn't require humans to plant it or attend to it. It grew up in the branches of the tree of its own volition, more or less. Right. So that kind of tied in with its energy of being evergreen and full of fertility and life force and all that kind of stuff. So, does anybody know where the kissing under the mistletoe tradition comes from? Yes.
Is it from the Celts? With they used it to ward off evil spirits, or to prevent if there was a baby born in the house during that year. That mistletoe was used to keep bad energy away or bad spirits.
There are many explanations for it. So it's a trick question because there are many explanations. And there's an elaborate heathen mythos about Freya and Baldur, which I don't know the heathen mythos that well, so I'm going to go with more the Celtic explanation. Essentially, mistletoe was one of these all curers. It was because of its actual, its vitality through the winter. It was seen as able to protect you against evil, able to heal all illnesses, able to strengthen you in battle. Anything you needed, really. It was an all-purpose, all-good kind of herb. And so often that meant fertility and vitality, since people needed that in hard times. And so from there, it came to be this sort of herb associated with partnership and love and making babies and stuff like that. So a bow of it was often in the home anyway, for the protecting of the home, the warding off bad spirits, the protecting the health of the inhabitants, etc. And then the whole kissing underneath it thing just kind of seemed to come apart.
You can do that in public. You can't do the other part of the fertility right in public.
Right. the more effective part, right?
I had a travel trailer that was parked under a big oak that had a huge clump, 2.5, 3 feet across, of mistletoe above the bed.
Mm.
And my wife and I had been married 3 weeks when she could see.
Did you take advantage of that blessing then?
Yeah.
The mistletoe?
We lost it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Wasn't meant to be. So what can we take magically from the mythology when it says, it's good for every single possible thing? It wards off evil, it protects your health, it makes you strong in battle, it brings you good luck, etc. What is that? Boiling that down, sort of looking deeper into that, what is it about?
Good for everything. Good in your spirit.
It's all good. It's all good.
A lot of energy.
A lot of energy. A lot of respect. Exactly. A lot of energy, a lot of respect. Those are the plants that are our close companions, you might say. As humans, we have a close relationship with plants. They've accumulated all of these different stories and mythos about them because we've used them so much in so many different ways. Because we're drawn to them since they have a lot of power, or because they are drawn to us and to working with us. But anytime you read plant mythology and you see that long list of every possible thing under the sun, I think what that's reflecting, it could be bad scholarship and people were just writing down and making, but I think it probably reflects a lot of different practice that people had, and those practices meant that people were using for all different kinds of stuff, which meant that we were in very close association with that plant, and that it was very, very powerful.
And probably the wide geographic distribution of the plants.
True. A lot of people had the opportunity to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think also that it was European, and then, it was also found here, too, so.
Yeah, I read somewhere that some culture considered if you shook hands on an agreement under the mistletoe, it was ironclad.
Yeah, I've heard that, too.
That was something else, too.
I haven't heard that one.
Because your sealing is under the power of the mistletoe.
Yeah, a plant that doesn't die, a plant that's outside of, this is the evergreen part of it, right? So what's really significant to about evergreens as that for us as humans, they seem to be exempt from the life-death cycle. We know, sort of scientifically, or if you're a gardener, you know that that's not entirely true, that an evergreen can die, but just based on the, again, mostly Northern European sort of life cycle of plants, these are plants that are outside of that pattern. They reproduce
outside of the normal yearly pattern, because like the holly, it doesn't defoliate and go dormant,
right?
Which is a little death. The thing you mentioned, the story of Balder. I don't know whether you know the story or not.
I don't know well enough to tell.
There was a prophecy that Balder, who was the son of Odin and Frigg, Odin was the king of the Norse gods, would be killed by a piece of wood. I don't remember the exact word. So Frigg, his mother, said, I don't want my little boy to be killed. And so she went and she spoke to the spirit of every major plant that might have an arrow or dart made out of it, and asked them to promise not to hurt Balder. She did not ask the mistletoe. The mistletoe spirit was offended that it wasn't asked. Loki, knowing she didn't ask the mistletoe, made a dart of the mistletoe, and when it came time to test Baldar's immunity to all of these darts and arrows, he gave this mistletoe dart to Baldar's brother and said, here, try this, and killed Balder with it. Hence the prophecy was carried out.
Right.
The power of mistletoe.
I would make only one correction, though. If I recall the story correctly, the prophecy was actually very vague. It was a dream that he would die, and then she actually went and extracted the promise from every plant, animal, stone, and just because the mistletoe was high up in the oak tree and she overlooked it.
In preparing for this, I found out that mistletoe is actually, there's research being done right now on mistletoe as an anti-cancer agent, that it actually is able to kill cancer cells. It strengthens the immune system in general, but it also kills cancer cells. So that's some pretty interesting stuff there too. And it's also still used to lower blood pressure and as a tranquilizer. So there's a lot of interesting properties there for herbalists to pursue. I'm not so much of an herbalist, but I know that there's so many different uses for this particular plant. Just to say a little bit about holly, also as another one of the major evergreens, and both of these plants grow here in Florida. There's multiple species of them, but they're really important for us of European heritage because they figure so much in the mythology of Northern Europe. While we could focus on the Florida versions of just their stories, I think it's also because they're part of our sort of collective consciousness as European and people of ancestral lines in Europe. The whole Holly King myth is one that was already mentioned. So a lot of Great Britain area, more than the Celts per se, but had a story about the annual cycle of the year, that the Holly King ruled the darker half of the year from summer solstice to winter solstice, and the Oak King the lighter half of the year, the growthful half of the year, and that the two battle at the two different solstices. And there's variations on that myth, but that just sort of shows you the holly really kind of represents everything about that part of the year that's when growth is in decline. So it's not as if there is no growth, but growth is turning inward and the light is retreating and our attention is focused inward. So the holly, as another evergreen, is important for our mythology. For that reason, it also has the red berries, which we mentioned as the red and the green of being the god and the goddess. Holly bushes are kind of interesting. There are male and female versions, and only the female versions produce the berries. So a lot of times, those are the only ones that are sold often for landscaping because people want the red berries. But in parts of the Celtic world, people will still refer to them as male and female, to call them he and she. And then one of the things that's really cool about holly is that it's often grown. It has also this long list of different magical properties. It's supposed to protect you against witches, or supposed to bring witches. It was supposed to protect you against evil spirits. It's supposed to make you healthy. It could be used as a poison. If you start just sort of taking that all literally, it can be very confusing. So again, as witches, as magicians, we know, the deeper meaning here is that this is a plant that has lent itself to human use for millennia and has partnered with humans in many different ways for many different purposes.
Just remember, the holly berry is toxic.
Yes.
Not just nauseous, but in too much, it's toxic.
Same with the mistletoe berry.
Yeah. We've got 3 that are local, that are of note. The Dahoon, which is the one with the red berries. The Yapon holly, which only gets about 10, 12 inches tall and has little black berries. That the Seminole used in their corn dance. Its Latin name says a lot about it. Ilex vomitoria.
Right. Right, that's what I have some of that here. We're going to have some tea from the Yapon.
You're going to have one that's 12 feet tall.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're going to have some tea from that. So other things that are important about holly mythology is beyond the holly king, and that they have association with protection often, and they're often in England were planted in front of your home to create a hedge. And so some of the mythology talks about these hedges were supposed to keep evil spirits out, right? So they were protective. But the hedges were also what witches ran along at night. So sometimes they were planted by witches in order to create these magical roadways between homes. Oh, and they're also, in the mythology you'll read, supposed to protect you from bad fairies and to attract fairies. So again, as a magician, you can sort this out and say, right, so clearly there's some sort of relationship with the unseen world that this plant facilitates, depending on what it is you want to do. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting that we could probably use as considered useful information is that if you brought the holly into the home, it was a good way to create a harmonious relationship between the fae and the humans. There's lots to meditate upon there and thinking about how that would have occurred, or what we could do today to try and figure out how that might work. Holly was actually fed to livestock in the wintertime in Northern Europe, and it was pretty nutritious. It sounds painful to eat it, right? To think about those little spiny things. But it was nutritious, so that was another reason it was important for people to grow and have around. And it was considered protection from lightning strike as well, which is very interesting that modern research on it actually shows that the plant, when it's struck by lightning, its little spines diffuse the lightning and doesn't kill the plant. Isn't that crazy? So maybe people observed that the plant had been struck and it hadn't died, and that was kind of why it was good for lightning strike protection.
Like, if you think about it, that's like a lightning bolt is a lot.
It's a whole lot. Yeah.
So remember, lightning usually comes from the ground up, as opposed to the sky down. So with all those little spines, it would tend to leak off from all over the plant and not just from a single point.
We plant holly up north under our windows to keep people from breaking in or keeping toms.
Yeah. So it's still protective. Right.
Very.
Right. Okay, so let's return to that point about the evergreen and thinking deeper about what that means and how we can use that as witches and pagans today. So we've said that evergreen, that class of plants were outside the normal life and death cycle, that they often were seen to have a multitude of different kinds of powers or potencies, and that they symbolized a power that was not subject to death in the same way. Right? So a freezing, cold, hard winter would not kill these plants when it would even kill humans. Right? So this is a very kind of important and powerful form of energy that we can tap into. One of the great things about living in Florida is we have a whole lot more plants than just holly and mistletoe that remain green all year. So if we stick with this principle of evergreens as sources of energy that sort of transcend life and death cycle, that they are full of vitality no matter what situation, no matter what the conditions are, then we can think about other plants that are also evergreen here where we live as potentially having that same kind of energy in them. Something in the nature of being an evergreen that is somewhat outside of the normal cycle of life and death and maybe transcends that to some degree, filled with vitality, filled with power that emanates from elsewhere than a lot of what happens on the earth. So in trying to refine the mistletoe that I was positive was here, I took a wander, and we have a lot of other possible candidates for that kind of energy. But does anybody have any that they want to mention? Things that are evergreen?
Resurrection fern.
Resurrection ferns are pretty amazing in that sense. Yeah.
How green they are right now.
Yeah, they're so beautiful right now.
They like all the rain.
These guys actually look like they die, so it's a little bit different in the sense that they have a really rapid cycle where they, in a couple of days, those could be brown and crunchy if it didn't rain anymore. And then they bloom overnight, or just within a few hours of the rain, they come back. So they have an energy of death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, which ultimately, of course, transcends our normal life and death cycle.
Yucca? Now, even I didn't think it was possible. It's a tropical plant, I thought, but put it in the ground, and then it gets too big. I chop it, and I threw it on the wood pile, and then it came back in when the frost and everything had stopped, and they had roots everywhere, so I stuck them in the ground. I was just planning to throw them away, but they keep coming back, and they keep coming back, and the cold doesn't do anything to them.
Wow.
So, it's bizarre. Yucca.
Like cassava?
Yeah.
Yucca?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's weird, but they continue, and I thought they would die every winter, but no.
Just stick it, and the nice thing about those is you can bury them vertically or horizontally, and they'll still start shooting up new shoots.
Wow.
I think that the air plants that grow on oaks are very akin to mistletoe energetically, in a sense. They grow off of the nutrients in the bark of the oak as well as in air. They're synthesizing their nutrients from the air, and they pretty much remain green. They can dry out and then come back with the rains, but they're living up away from the earth.
Spanish moss also.
Spanish moss.
Also
A lot of our air plants.
Definitely Spanish moss.
Yeah. So do you guys want to go talk to some of these evergreen plant spirits for a second and see what happens? See what we get? So what I was thinking is, this evergreen energy would be a great one to tap into for something, for spell work that needed a really constant, reliable source of energy. Right? So what's an evergreen? It's an unchanging nature. And so if you were going to do a spell that needed something really long-lasting, a constant trickle battery, tying it to the evergreen in some way would be a possibility. Right? Might work. What we all do as witches, when we want to get rid of something, we bury it in the ground, so the ground can decompose it, right? Can take the energy as well as the actual physical parts of it apart and transform it into something else. If we really want to, if we're emotionally upset, we go to the ocean and we cry into the ocean. So we do spell work using the powers of the earth that are around us all the time, and plants are another great way to do that. So we can plant a tree on an important occasion and commemorate that, but I think actually also asking the deva, or the intelligence of the plant, to work with us on the spell just adds to our ability to make the spell work. Yeah, I thought I had, but I haven't found it today. I've been walking around and haven't found it.
I know I've seen the Racine. I haven't seen the Amon. I haven't seen the...
If anybody doesn't feel up to walking around, also there are these leaves. The plant deva spirits can still access through dried versions of those plants. It's a different experience, but there's no reason why it can't work. This still contains, just like a crystal, a particular kind of energy code.
So it's like fairy Wi-Fi.
It's a... I'm dialing in.
I like that.
I mean, it's the whole reason people carry plants around with them in mojo bags is not because they need that. It's the energetic essence of the plant, right? And so the energetic pattern that any part of a plant makes, the relationship of molecules and chemicals and constituent parts is present, right? So it's a little battery, or the Wi-Fi, the access code.
Yeah, the trouble down here in Florida is to find a plant that does go dormant in the winter.
It's true. It's true. It's a very it's a little bit different.
That's the red maple.
They shed their leaves and
they turn color and they do shed, the red maple. The sea grape puts out new red leaves in the spring and immediately drops. As soon as the new ones are up, it drops all the old ones.
And it do that a couple times a year.
Peach sheds all their leaves this time of year.
What does?
Peach.
Peach.
Cypress also go through an annual cycle.
Yes, it does. Cypress is one of the few conifers that does go dormant.
So, who has not spoken with plant devas before?
Not really.
I've never.
Here's my 3 tips for talking to plant devas. This is probably, as a refresher for other people also. The first is to believe that it's possible. So, do your best to quiet the questioning mind and just allow it to happen. That's a hard step, actually. For some people, not for everybody, not for little kids, for sure. Number 2 is to quiet down your own energy. So you're good at this. You have quiet energy already. But a lot of us are sort of like, let's do this.
You have like library energy compared to me.
A lot of the plant world is moving at a very much different pace, right? Much slower pace. Just slow it down. And then the third tip is to practice active listening. So the response is going to come depending on how you are wired. So some people actually hear voices from plant devas. Some people get a feeling. Some people get a visual image of what is going on. So if I'm wandering around in Steve's garden and I'm talking to the plants about how they're doing and just checking in, I often feel something. I don't exactly hear the words, but I can translate the feeling into something just because of practice. But other people see visual images. They see the plant doing great if it just had X, Y, or Z like that. So those are the 3 things. So I'm going to recommend we walk toward the front here because there's a ton of resurrection ferns and beautiful oak trees that have air plants and
Just moss.
Anywhere you walk, you've got that here.
yeah. Moss goes dormant. It's kind of almost like a resurrection fern. So it dries. If it's dry, it goes dormant, and then it comes right back.
Right. I'm still trying to think of, we have so many plants that don't go dormant, but the reason they don't go dormant is because we don't get cold.
Right. But and so if I have to summarize this workshop in case we wander, this is the point, is we have this major source here, being in the tropics or semi-tropics. We have all of this green energy around all the time. So if you're feeling depleted or if you need a spell that has a constant source of energy that doesn't fluctuate, or if you need inspiration, there is this vibrancy that's always present. We don't really have to wait until spring for inspiration and new growth and new ideas. And we don't have to tuck all of that away at Samhain, like people who are living farther.
The other thing is you choose your color of green based upon what you need.
It's true. There's a lot of different kinds of green here, even. This is a very mild version of Japan holly tea. This canister was filled with dried, toasted leaves and sitting in boiling water for an hour. This same tree, this is a native to Florida, and it was the most sacred tree to the Tequesta and the indigenous people of Florida. And the Seminoles today they adopted that from earlier tribes. And they made a super concentrated version of this where they decoction for many days, which became so caffeinated that it was psychoactive.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of caffeine. It takes a lot of caffeine to become psychoactive. Mm-hmm. They actually, on ceremonial occasions, used it as a purification. So they would drink so much that they would cause them to vomit. And there's different mythologies about this. I'm not sure that this is all true, but about, the person who could drink the most was the most respected. Before vomiting was the most respected. But I think...
Like a frat. I was just saying
I think that's a white person's interpretation. You think about it magically. It's an emetic. It's a purgative. A purgative. It's meant to purify you, so you are supposed to vomit from it. But you keep doing it, and so you enter an altered state of consciousness due to the caffeine.
What kind
There
of
was
color
also a fast associated
Yaupon.
with it. Yupon.
Sorry?
Osceola, the Last Warrior.
No, isn't it one of them has the name, something about the...
Oh, Black Drink Man. Yeah, Black Drink.
Which one is that?
That's maybe Osceola. Forget. Yeah. Yaupon. Y-A-U-P-O-N.
Y-A-U?
Y-A-U-P-O-N. And so today, Seminole, other people in the Southeast, they still make a drink. They call it the black drink. It's not made with Japan holly. Doesn't cause you to vomit. I was a guest at the square grounds outside of Tallahassee, and they had a black drink. It was made from a lot of different herbs. It was caffeinated. Maybe it had Japan holly in it, but they've given up on vomiting as a form of purification these
Well, the
days.
whole intent of that ritual was to enter that psychic state. And so therefore, as part of the purification, you had to fast. That's the first thing that sets your body up to go into the psychoactive state. Then you go through the sweat lodge, and while in the sweat lodge, you drink the black tea, and then you go and you purge your body. And the things I had read both ends. So it was a full body cleanse. And then from there you go into the green state.
It's tasty, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. You can imagine if we toasted it a little bit more, it brings out more flavor. And
Oh, so
people
you
would do
toasted that? Okay.
Yep. Dried and then toasted. You can toast it some more, bring out more flavor, let it steep more. Okay, so let's go talk to some plants. Okay, so anybody have anything they wanted to share?
Yes, I have this quote beside it. No, did you see it? I was walking and I thought it was just kind of stuck, but it was like all the way around my leg. So I'm like,
That's
it must-
for you then.
it's supposed to come.
How is it for Matt?
I could feel the differences between like old and younger trees. Like the first tree I touched, kind of got like an instant sense of like calm and groundedness. Like I mean, like I'm a pretty chill person, but like it was just like a.
Let me show you a deeper level of chill.
And then went to like, it looked like a younger tree. Felt more vibrant and not any less calm, but like more energy. It seemed like.
Different species feel differently too.
Mm-hmm.
So, like an oak and a pine, huge differences, but so that worked.
Mm-hmm.
What was really cool with some of those ferns that are growing on the trees, they felt like a tingling of bells. They're like happy.
They are happy. Mm-hmm. Those guys are happy, especially when it's raining.
Everything's happy with the rain. They're like,
Yeah,
yay! It's like a shower. Yes.
You're so thirsty. Did you have anything to share?
I felt sad. No, that
We just said everybody's happy.
okay. Sorry.
Way to have the wrong feeling on it.
Hey, there are no wrong feelings.
These are wrong.
It's just that people don't spend more time with them.
You don't really feel
Connect
it.
with them. And then take the time to appreciate you're not just a tree, you're wow, you're a tree, you know?
Yeah, they were happy that we were here.
This property is very happy when people are here. I've noticed that since the first time we came, and it's not just the trees and the plants, but like the whole grounds. But they're not have also, in my opinion, certain species are really more interested in human attention than others. So citrus trees, for example, in my opinion, they love attention. They're like little divas that want a lot of praise and
They're like the
compliments.
Leos of the plant world.
Needy Leos. But
That's him.
not an average Leo, a needy Leo. I had never tried to interact with the air plants before, and I went over, and what I usually do is grab a hold of the plant and start touching it, and I was getting like the...
Yeah, like, don't really touch me too much. Like, what are you
don't
doing?
really touch me, like, back off. So I backed off, and I was just, and then it was like, it's all about the aura with those
Yeah,
plants.
it was
And
more
so
like
you could
petting
feel
it
the aura
than
then,
feeling it.
and everything felt good. And they were like, we make stuff out of nothing, and I got that would be a great, like, prosperity plant. They make stuff out of nothing.
That's what I was getting. They're about creating opportunities, entrepreneurship, starting small businesses, teaching us about dependence and interdependence in a healthy way, so you can use them for relationship magic. We're also about dreaming, about reaching for the sky and creating what you dream.
Ooh.
That's what
I
was
love
getting
that.
here.
I was getting where they're like, hey, this whole like life-death thing, come on now, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. You just come back. Look at all these little, seeds, their little, because they have all their little eggs, all the little babies in the back. They're like, there's just more. Just don't
Yeah.
worry.
That is exactly why I usually say in these kind of workshops, do not listen to the plant if it tells you to eat it. Because plants don't mind dying. They have a very different experience of that. And, like they say in the mushroom workshops.
Great adventure.
Yeah. Like, it's just going to come back. So
You
what's
haven't
the
done
big
this
deal?
yet. Let me help you.
Yeah.
In the mushroom workshops, they say there's old mushroom hunters and bold mushroom hunters.
Yeah.
But no old, bold mushroom hunters.
Every mushroom is edible once.
And that's pretty much true of plants as well, because I've had other, I think Chris Benzak said that first in a workshop I was in. He's like, the plant will tell you to eat it because it wants to get to know you in that way, and just, you can take a pass on that until you know more about.
Let somebody else eat the red berry first.
Yeah, I know, at least when I was taught, the whole communication aspect was to, leave an offering. So I know, at least in our tradition, it's we give first before we take, before to receive. So it's like if you didn't have like water or anything else, to give, it's like, well, here, a piece of hair. Just leave a little piece of you. So it helps with that communication. Yeah, and then
You're
the
giving.
other thing, and the other thing too was because we have that reverse aspect of, that the plants bring in oxygen and give us oxygen, and then we give out the carbon dioxide, is just breathing to the tree or to the plant as an offering as well, because that's what we provide for them.
Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah.
That's that reciprocal, co-creative.
Mm-hmm. It's a pretty deep thing just to meditate on as well.
Yeah.
We all learn that in kindergarten, but it's like, if you really stop and just think about that.
In our tradition, that's one of the things we do in the spring equinox ritual. We take like a small plant, and we literally will like breathe with it and meditate on that as you do so, and feel it, alive, and how you're, it's profound if you really get into it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. I think we're out of time.
Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Before we begin our last segment of this episode, we'd like to thank you for listening. Putting a podcast together is a time-consuming labor of love, but knowing that someone is listening to our hard work and hopefully gaining something from it makes it worthwhile. Would you let us know you like the podcast by going to our website at emlc.net, click on the podcast tab, and write a comment. Tell us what you like and what you'd like to hear more of on our podcast. And even better, why not leave us a rating on iTunes? Ratings help us become more visible to more people. It's not about ego, it's all about service. Thank you, and blessed be.
And our last song for this episode is called Land of the Dancing Trees, and it's by Emerald Rose from their album Sunwise. You can learn more about Emerald Rose and purchase their music at emeraldrose.com.
Dancing trees, oaks delved deeply and danced in the breeze. Great sylvan gods rose tall, and with every nation they were at peace. And there rode the hero in his heart the majesty's call. Fain would he dance their dance, or spend all his days in the forested halls. Then how shall a hero be welcome in the land of the dancing trees? A cobbler to make fine shoes for your deep-rooted feet. I have the skills bending leather, and great's my renown for the stitching of seams. We have no need of your shoes, lad. Bracken and soil keep our roots safe and warm. Better you cobble your own shoes, so you may dance on the stones without harm. How may a hero be welcome in the land of the dancing trees? Have a baker to bake fine breads and your table prepare. I know the grist and the raisin, bake you a loaf that is lighter than air. We have no need of your baking, sunlight and skies all the fare that we need. Take of our seeds and our fruits now, use them to nourish your own body's need. Then how may a hero be welcome in the land of the dancing trees? Have ye the need of a warrior to drive off your foes and your borders secure? I know the blade and the hammer, I'll fight for your nation with hands swift and sure. We have no need for your fighting, we have no treasure that we would not share. Go then and suffer your own wars, peace is our kingdom and we shall live there. Then how may a hero be welcome in the land of the dancing trees? But know ye the man of all seasons, master of skills in the service of light, the man who is every profession, so he may love every facet of life. We know the man of all seasons, king to your people and friend to the land. We welcome you home to your own heart, all of your kind will one day understand. For thus may a hero